control the current in this big circuit, we use this smaller circuit called the control grid. So what this control grid does is, you can see the small plate with pores, right? So if we apply a voltage to this small plate, this thing has a negative charge now. So naturally, negative repels negative. So this will repel most of the electrons that want to cross and reach the anode, and hence a total of less electrons will reach the anode. Less flow of electrons means a less overall current in the bigger circuit. And if this thing, the control grid plate, has almost no voltage, then it will repel no electrons, and it will all the electrons will pass through, and hence an overall higher current will be in the larger circuit. So this is just how a vacuum triode works. Why is it called a triode? Because it has three plates, as you can see over here. Take the control grid out, and that would be a vacuum diode. So this is what a vacuum triode used to look like. These were pretty huge, and around 2000 of these were required to operate a simple computer. And so a normal computer, which can't even compare to the most basics of laptops today, took up rooms to fill, and it didn't even have that many applications. So all this changed when in 1947 the scientists at Bell Labs invented the transistor. The transistor did the same job, but the transistor was comparatively a lot smaller, and it used a lot less power to work. So from vacuum triodes to transistors, this effect kept on going, and the circuits we made kept on getting more compact and more complex. So this picture that I showed you, this vacuum triode is nearly 5 inches high. And to give you a sense of scale of how much we have progressed, the first few generations of vacuum triodes were around 5 inches high, which is bigger but comparatively the same as the Intel i9 processor that contains around 7 billion transistors. So that is really mind blowing and sounds really fishy, but that is actually true. We have progressed to a scale where transistors are just 15 nanometers in size. You can't even see them, and there is a transistor there. So not only transistors, but all electrical components that we use in really complex chips are on the scale of nanometers. So does anyone have any idea how far we can go? How much smaller, how much more smaller can we make our electrical components before they just start breaking and we don't even know about it? Anyone? Okay, it's all right if you don't know about it. The answer is actually 7 nanometers. And why this is actually really complicated. It is something known as the Moore's law. You can read up about it if you want. But that Moore's law states that 7 nanometers is the limit. If we go beyond that, the all the components will just break. They won't be able to handle the stress. So that is the limit of how far we can go with reducing the size of our electrical components. So we all know about automated food factories, which produce our favorite chips, favorite brand of chips or biscuits, to self-driving cars by Tesla. It is evident that the use of electronics has automated a huge amount of processes. But all these complicated, fully automated machines obviously require a huge amount of data to work. So if we are not constantly feeding it data, how do you think a fully automated machine gets its own data? If we are not constantly feeding it data, how does it get its own data? Anyone? This is a really simple answer if you think about it. Even if it's a wrong answer, you can just post it in the chat box. It's fine. Okay, no one is posting the answer. This is actually a really simple answer. The answer to this question is sensors. We all know what sensors are. And what do sensors do? They sense, or in more technical terms, they use a fixed logic to gather a certain value of data of their surroundings, which is relevant to what process they are computing. For example, if Tesla needs to gather data about it, it will gather the data about traffic lights and the cars around it. It won't be gathering data of how chips are made or how biscuits are made. So they need to gather relevant data, and that's what they do with the help of sensors. So there are a lot of sensors, the ultrasonic sensor, PIR sensor. There are a ton of sensors. These that I've mentioned here are relatively simple, but there are really complex sensors as well. So let's look at some sensors, how they look like in real life. This is what we call the accelerometer. What this does, it measures acceleration. It's there in the name. It measures acceleration. That's all it does. It looks really complex, but its function is really simple. The second one, this one is what we call the gyroscope. All of us know about the auto rotate function in our phones, right? But how does your phone know whether it's in portrait, landscape, what form is it? How does it know? That is because of this thing, the gyroscope. A different form of this, obviously, a much smaller version of this is used in our mobile phones. And this is what is used to measure the orientation of your phone in 3D space. So this is how your phone is aware of its orientation or how it is placed. This thing, which looks like a robotic face with two eyes, we all have seen. We all have seen some movies that we might remember looking at this. And this is what we call the ultrasonic sensor. We all know about it, and we will be discussing its working in detail later on. This is what is called the temperature and humidity sensor. Again, it's there in the name. It measures temperature and humidity. This is an infrared proximity sensor. So what this does, it uses infrared lights to detect when something is in the vicinity of the sensor. That's it. That's all it does. And this rather complex looking thing is what we call the PIR, or the passive infrared sensor, which we will be talking about more later on in the workshop. Okay, so let's start with ultrasonic sensors. The HCSR04, okay, big names. This is just a form, this is just a version of the sensor. That's it, that's all there is to it. No more meaning to this name over here. It is just a version of the ultrasonic sensors. So obviously any ultrasonic sensor is used to measure distance of itself from an object. So all the different versions have a different range of distances that they can accurately measure. So theoretically speaking, this version can measure distances ranging from 2 centimeters to 4.5 meters, whereas practically the accurate readings of this sensor range from 2 centimeters to 80 centimeters. So let's see the working of the ultrasonic sensor. The ultrasonic sensor has the two eye looking things, right? So the right eye of the ultrasonic sensor is actually the transmitter, or the part of the sensor which actually sends out ultrasonic waves. So ultrasonic waves are sent out, they reflect from an object, in this case this cylinder, and they come back, and while coming back they are picked up by the left eye, or the uh, receiving pin, or the receiver of the ultrasonic sensor. So how does all this evaluate the distance between the ultrasonic sensor and the object? Well, we all know the formula: distance is equal to speed into time. Ultrasonic waves have the same speed as the speed of sound, so we technically know the speed over here. All we need to do is calculate the time taken by the ultrasonic waves to go out of the transmitter, get reflected, and then be received by the receiver, and that will give us the distance. If we multiply speed into time, that will give us 2 times the distance, since the ultrasonic waves are traveling this distance twice in that time period. But a simple division by 2 will give us the accurate distance of the ultrasonic sensor and the object. So that is basically what is happening over here. So whenever a current, you can see this start pulse, right? This is a small current or small pulse of current of 10 microseconds that is sent into the ultrasonic sensor, and hence the transmitter actually sends out a 10 microsecond pulse of ultrasonic waves. So this wave travels. This is called the chirp, and this travels, it reflects, and is received. So how do we measure the time then? What we do is that if normally in idle state, this receiving pin is constantly sending a current as an input. So it's just sending a current, sending a current, sending a current, sending a current. But as soon as an ultrasonic wave is received, it stops sending a current. So that is what is denoted by this echo time pulse. It's constantly sending a current, sending a current. As soon as the wave is received, it stops sending a current. Now, the time for which if it was sending a current is actually equivalent to the time taken by the ultrasonic wave to travel the distance. So if we measure the time for which the current was being sent, we actually have the time for which the ultrasonic wave was traveling, or we have the time required. So speed into time by 2, and we have the accurate distance of this ultrasonic sensor from this obstacle. Now you can see all this stuff, VSS, VDD, really complicated looking stuff. But it's actually really simple. We all know this symbol. It is the ground. Just for electrical safety, it is connected to the ground. And VDD, it's an electrical component. So obviously it needs power to work. So this actually is connected to the 5-volt supply, to a 5-volt supply. And then your ultrasonic sensor is ready to function. So I hope that that the working of the ultrasonic sensor is clear to you. So that was all for the ultrasonic sensor. The next type of sensor that we need to look at is the light detecting resistor, or the LDR. This is one of the most simplest sensors to understand. So LDR is a sensor that is used to detect light levels. It sounds really complicated, right? How does it accurately measure light levels? How is that even done? So it is not at all complicated. It works on the simple phenomenon that when a resistor absorbs energy, the number of charge carriers increases, and hence more current can flow. So you can see by this graphic that in daylight, the um, the meter is detecting 500 ohms. So the more the light, the less the resistance. And at night, when it's dark, it is detecting 200 kilo ohms, not 200 ohms, 200 kilo ohms. You can see a drastic change in light. So since the range of this resistor is so huge, it is actually able to measure the light levels very precisely. So this thing is used to tell us how light or how dark it is. So that was all for the LDR. I told you it's really simple. And now we come to a little more complicated sensor known as the passive infrared sensor, or the PIR. So the PIR is a motion detector. It sounds complicated, but it's not as complicated as it seems. So I'll just show you the working of it through this schematic. So this is the main PIR sensor. And as you can see, it has two slots which are depicted by this red area and green area. So when the sensor is idle, uh, the PIR sensor, there is IR in the name, infrared. So obviously it is sensitive to infrared radiations. In fact, both of these slots have an individual infrared sensor inside of this whole PIR. I know this looks like a tiny thing, but it actually also has two more sensors inside it already fitted into it. Each of these slots actually has an infrared sensor attached to it. So what happens is, when the sensor is sitting idle, there is no movement in front of it. This just detects the ambient or the ever present infrared radiations of the room or wherever it is kept. And hence, both of these slots, or both of these infrared sensors, will actually give the same reading. So we can see this straight line on the graph. That means that the readings of both the slots are same. Whenever this is a flat line, that means the reading of both the slots is the same. Now, whenever there is movement, whenever a big red giant dragon walks in front of the sensor, it follows this path. So in short, it first enters the red area, then leaves it, and then enters the green area. So when it is in the red area, all of us, or any living thing moving, or any almost all living things, even us, we emit infrared radiations. So when the dragon is in the red area, obviously this dragon will be emitting some more infrared radiations. So hence slot 1 will have an overall higher reading than slot 2. Do you agree? Since slot 2 doesn't have a giant fire breathing dragon, while slot 1 does. And hence we get this upward curve, meaning that slot 1 has a more reading than has a more of a reading than slot 2. And in fact there is something moving in the detecting area. And when the dragon reaches slot 2 and is not in slot 1, obviously slot 2 is the one detecting more infrared radiations, and hence we get this downward curve. So whenever we get a signal out of this PIR sensor, we can for sure confirm that something or the other is moving in front of the infrared sensor. So this is how actually infrared sensors work. And the PIR sensor detects movement in this way. Now you might be wondering, what is this glass sheet over here for, the Fresnel lens? This is just to alter the detecting area. Let's say we remove this lens, then the detecting area would be really narrow. If you can imagine, through the concept of refraction, this thing is actually diverging the rays. The Fresnel lens is actually diverging the rays coming out of the PIR sensor, or in short, converging the rays coming into the PIR sensor. So if we remove this, all this red area and green area will be just a straight rectangle. And if we increase the curvature, that means the detecting area will also increase. So that was all about the infrared sensors, and those are all the sensors we will be discussing today. So before I pass on the presentation, if any of you has any doubts regarding what I have told you about, you are free to post your answers in the chat, your questions in the chat box, and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, Prashant has asked, is this sensor even helpful in high temperature areas? It doesn't matter if there is a high temperature area or a low temperature area. Obviously, there will be some alteration made to it regarding when it comes to the specific use. But if you see over here, we are actually just measuring the difference in the voltage, difference in the infrared detection of slot 1 and slot 2. This is again a different form of the PIR sensor. Please do remember, there are a whole lot of different forms of the PIR sensor. But even in high temperature areas, what we need to do is we need to measure the difference of the infrared readings. We don't need to measure the exact readings. We just need to measure the difference. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, a PIR is passive infrared sensor, as I said before. So if there are no more doubts, I would like to pass this presentation on to Anshul, who will be telling you about microcontrollers and microprocessors. Over to you, Anshul.
Hello. Okay. So hey everyone, I'm Anshul Agarwal. My friend Kaustav told you about a lot of amazing sensors. But you know what? When I say hardware, I mean robots, automation, and other cool stuff. Look at this pretty circuit, blinking an LED, the hello world of hardware. I don't know about you, but I kinda understand this circuit. Two LEDs perfectly blink in sync. Amazing. Then this is the circuit of a voice recorder. Oops. Seriously, how do I make cool perseverance robot and dancing bots if I have to deal with such complexity just to make trivial thing as a voice recorder? But wait, there is a thing called Arduino, right? What is it? Arduino sounds fun. Okay, so Arduino is an open source electronics prototyping platform based on a flexible, easy to use hardware and software. Lot of jargon there. Let's start one by one. Let's take prototype first. So prototype is a development stage product. Everything is not perfect in a prototype because you want to experiment with different things and do it fast. Arduino provides a quick plug and play model wherein instead of dealing with the complex circuitry, you can abstract out the processing, the sensors, the actuators. The flexibility is another important term here. Arduino is flexible. You can use the same Arduino to build things ranging from tabletop robots to drones to dystopian killer machines. No pun intended there. Okay, so when we talk about Arduino, we are majorly talking about Arduino as a microcontroller. Microcontroller is a simple device that uses microcontroller is a simple device that let us control sensors and motors using code. That's what a microcontroller is. Please remember this word. So while Arduino is a kind of microcontroller, there are several other microcontrollers available in the market. So why choose Arduino? First of all, it's cheap. The genuine board cost around rupees 3000, and since it is open source, you can buy a cheap knockoff costing from around 500 to 600 bucks from Amazon. Apart from the price, it has the community support. You know what? Hardware can get messy at times. So when you are stuck somewhere, all your answers will just be a Google search away. So this is how the beast looks like. The first board which you can see is the Arduino Uno, and the first board is the Arduino Uno, and we will be using this for our presentation in the demonstration section. And we have some other form factors. The lower left is the Arduino Lily. This is used in wearable gadgets. And this is Arduino Mega. Uh, this is large and it have greater processing power. This is Arduino Nano and this is SparkFun board. So they are just other variation containing different hardwares. Okay, so what I want is to you to think Arduino as a CPU. This is where all the computations happen. So yeah, so let's do a thing. All my gamer friends here and even others, can you please write down your CPU's configuration in the chat box? What is your processing power, the RAM? Time for some flexing. I want you to write the CPU configurations in the chat box of the computer that you own. Okay, we have 8 GB RAM, GTX processors, M1 chip. Okay, those are some fancy configurations. But our tiny friend, the Atmega 830 328, the chip that's power Arduino, is a bit humble. You can see the CPU speed is just 20 megahertz. RAM is 2 KB. Okay, so while you can't play the latest Cyberpunk in the Arduino board, but you can do some pretty cool stuff. You can see what people have done using this board. We have the robotic crawler, the self-balancing robot, blinking LEDs, and yeah, the sonar detector. M1 chip can't do this, right? So yeah, if I was able to inspire you or motivate you to learn a bit deeper, let's get into the real hardware. This is how the Arduino Uno looks like. Okay, let's start one by one. This is the power circuitry. You use this ports, this section, to power on the Arduino. Power on as in to provide the voltage to the Arduino to run. Then we have the USB to serial converter. So as I told you, Arduino is where you code the hardware. So you write your code in your PC and then you upload that code to the Arduino board. So you do this using this section, using a cable. This is the microcontroller part, which is already discussed. And then we have the GPIO pins. GPIO means general purpose input output. Okay, so let's break that down. You can think of GPIO as the USB port of your computer, right? So just like the USB port, you can connect mics and speakers, both input and output device in your computer, right? It's a two-way channel. Similarly, the pins that Arduino provides are input and output pins. It could be used as an input pin for the various sensors that my friend Costa spoke about in the earlier section, or you can connect it to fun motors and actuators to control real stuff in your environment. So that's the GPIO. And yeah, so there are two kinds of GPIO pins: digital pins and analog pins. So yeah, we all know, right? There are two types of electronic signals: digital and analog. Could you write down the difference between the two? We have been studying this for a while now. The difference between digital and analog signals. Anyone? Okay, we have some answers. Continuous, discrete, high, low. That's absolutely correct. Okay, so digital signals are the signals that have only two values, 0 and 1, as rightly mentioned. Here, 0 represents the off state and 1 represents the on state. And let's be very clear, Arduino operates on a 5-volt logic. 5-volt logic. So the on state represents 5 volt. So when we will say 0, it means 0 volt. And when we will say 5 volts, when we will say 1, it means 5 volts, right? Then we have the analog signal. So as we know, it is the continuous signal. So for the Arduino, it's divided into 255 equal parts, ranging from 0 to 255. Here 0 is mapped to 0 volt and 255 is mapped to 5 volt, right? 0 is mapped to 0 volt and 255 is mapped to 5 volts. So could you estimate that what number will the voltage 2.5 will be mapped to? If 0 represents 0 volt, 255 represents 5 volt, which number will represent 2.5 volt, which is half of 5 volt? None. Okay. Any more answers? Yeah, that's correct, Nishant. It's actually 125. Okay, how did we get that? So as I said, that the 5 volt is divided into 255 equal parts. So if you half the voltage from 5 volt to 2.5 volt, then you have to half this number from 255. You will get 125, right? So that's how analog signals work. We will get to the details during the demonstration, so don't worry if you don't get it right away. Okay, so we learned that using an Arduino, we can control hardware using code. Now let's get to the actual code. In the demonstration section, you will see the working, but let us understand few important functions. The first one is pin mode. So as I said, that a pin can work both as an input pin and an output pin. So for a particular use case, you have to decide if it should work as an input or output, and you use the pin mode function to do that. Digital write and digital read are used to write digital signals, which is 0 volt or 5 volt. Suppose if you want to turn on an LED, then you can simply digital write that pin to high. It will turn on the LED, and to turn it off, you can digital write that pin to low. Analog write is similarly used to write analog signals. And then delay. Delay is an important function here. So suppose if you want to add a delay, a physical time wait while the execution of your code, then you can use the delay function. You can simply pass on a number in milliseconds, and your execution will hold there for the specified milliseconds. That's delay. Serial begin and serial println is used to log data in your monitor. and this will also be discussed further. Okay, so this is a simple algorithm to blink an LED. What will you do? We will first digital write 5 volt to the LED. Then using the delay function, we will wait for 2 seconds. Then we will digital write 0 volt, which will turn off the LED. Then again we will wait for 2 seconds, and this process will repeat infinitely. If you write such code, you will get a blinking LED, right? So yeah, Kostav talked about the sensors. Then I talked about Arduino. Now let's put it together. So this is a breadboard, nothing related with bread, but let's talk about it. So breadboard looks something like this. It is a device for temporary prototyping of electronics and to test circuit. Most electronics component in electronic circuits can be interconnected by inserting their terminals into the holes and then making the connection where wires are appropriate. The small boxes represent pin holes where you can plug in your sensors or actuators pins. All these are connected as shown in the diagram. The central pins are vertically connected and the edge pins are horizontally connected. So that was all about breadboard. It is used to prototype electronic circuits without soldering. Okay, so now you have a brief idea about Arduino, right? But then what is that Raspberry thing which your friend was talking about? Raspberry Pi, or that Raspberry thing, is a single board computer, a microprocessor to be precise. It is slightly different from our friendly microcontroller. Microprocessors like Raspberry Pi consist only a central processing unit, whereas microcontroller like Arduino contains the CPU, memory, and the all-important GPIO pins, all integrated into a single circuit. Okay, that was it. Enough of theory. Now time for some action, right? You came here to see some moving stuff. So now my friend Yuvraj will show you his latest project. Over to you, Yuvraj.
So thanks, Anshul, for presenting such a great session on Arduino. And now I will be showing you a moving project on Arduino, that is my smartphone controlled car, which I have made using an Arduino. Okay, so how many of you have played from that remote control toy car in your early childhood? I want to see that how many of you have played from that car, remote control car. Please type in the chat box. Okay, it seems some of you have played from a remote control car in your early childhood. So I have also made the same using Arduino. Okay, so let's have a look like what I have made. Isn't that amazing that this car can be made just using an Arduino? Well, not just an Arduino, I have used several other components to make this car. I will be telling it to you one by one. At first, I have used this Arduino as the main brain of my car. And secondly, the L293 3D motor driver to control the speeds of all the motors, and Bluetooth module HC05 to set up and communication between my smartphone and my car. And fourth, I've used four brush DC motors. And here I want to ask one question to you all. How many types of motor are available there in market? Motors comes of how many types? Can anyone of you tell in the chat box? Okay, so I can see several other types of motor. Yeah, basically there are mainly two types of motor available in the market. One is DC and other one is AC motors. And there are subcategories also there in those two types of motor, which are brushed motors, and another one is brushless DC motors. And the same applies for AC also. There are brushless AC motors also and brushed AC motors also. So in my project, I have used brushed DC motors, and the next thing I have used is batteries, and I am using 12-volt power supply to power up my Arduino as well as my motor controller. Okay, so let's look how these all parts look in real. So in your screen, on your screen, you can see an Arduino. Okay, my friend Anshul has told you like a lot about Arduino. I will be giving a short description about it. This is your from this you can control your you can connect your PC to your Arduino and upload the code inside the Arduino. Okay, so next we have Adafruit L293D motor driver. Yeah, I think you can see this L293D written over there. Basically, this is an IC which is on which this full board is made. Okay, so the main part of this full board is these three ICs through which our all the motors will be controlled. Okay, so at next we have Bluetooth module HC05. As I told you, this is the only part through which your car is being made wireless, and or communication is set up between your smartphone to your car. Okay, so in this Bluetooth module HC05, you can see there are 6 pins, but we are going to use only 4 pins out of which these 2 pins are to power this Bluetooth module. They are +5 and ground pin, and then other 2 pins are TX and RX pins, mainly transmitting and receiving pins. Okay, so at next, as I told you before, I have used these brushed DC motors in my project, and these motors, and you can see this yellow box over there. Two means This yellow box is basically here. Inside this yellow box, there are some gates attached to the DC motors, so that we can increase the speed of our RPM speed of our motors. Okay, so the software is needed, as Anshul said, Arduino is an hardware plus software thing. Okay, so we need to upload the code, make code and upload in our Arduino to to pick out our outputs and all. Okay, so this Arduino ID software is easily available on the internet. You can download it for free. And so let's have a look on this schematic diagram. So it looks like very easy. These four motors are directly connected over this motor driver, and there is no much big problem in that. But it does not apply to the in the real estate, because you won't be able to use other pins. And the main disadvantage that I found using this Adafruit motor driver was that only because we can't access the other pins of our Arduino. To join this our Bluetooth module HC05, we will be joining the RX and TX pin to RX and TX of Bluetooth this Arduino only, but there is no separate pin given over there for these two. So let's see how I made this connections in real. So as you can see, these two pair of wire I have used for motor one, these two pairs for motor two, these two pair for motor 3, these two for motor 4. So motors are connected easily, and you can see this my Bluetooth module HC05. Okay, to power this Bluetooth module, I have taken +5 and ground from my Arduino itself, and to power this Adafruit motor driver, I have given +12 voltage to this motor driver, which is equally distributed over motor driver as well as an Arduino. Okay, so next to join this TX and RX pin, see, I have joined in parallelly with this Arduino. There is no separate pin given on this Adafruit motor driver. So this is the only problem. If you just only use this motor driver, you won't be able to access these all pins until and unless you solder it and create your own pin. Okay, so after assembling all the parts, you will be able to see the project like this. It is so cool, I think. And now we come to our Arduino code. Like as I told, we are using this Adafruit motor driver. So like we need to install the Adafruit motor driver library into our Arduino. Okay. So until and unless we don't add this, our code will not work in Arduino. Okay. So to install it is simple. You can easily install this motor shield library, and now I will show you the full code. Okay, I will not go so deep inside the code because many of you would are not so familiar with this IDE. So I will tell you from beginning and see. See, in the first line, I have included that afmotor.h library, which is necessary in order to use this Adafruit motor driver. Okay, so in the first four lines, I have initialized the motor pins of my car and declared a command variable over there. Okay, and let's come to the main part of the code. Like void loop is the main part of your code. Like from this loop only, you will be your car will work. Okay, as there is a main function in C or C++, as same there is a loop function in Arduino. Okay, so I will tell you in a very shortcut way. Like we have declared a command variable over in this. So this value of command variable we are getting it from our mobile. Okay, and based on the value of command variable, we are making our car move forward. Like suppose if the value of command variable is f, then based on the conditional switch case statement, our forward loop will be executed. Okay, as you can see, based on the different values of command, all these loops are executed. If it is f, then forward loop will be executed. If it is b, then back loop will be executed. And I will show you these all functions. Okay, so let's see this forward function over here. Like I will tell you in a very smooth way. Like this forward function, all these four motors will start moving in an clockwise direction and with their full pace. Okay, in a clockwise direction with their full speed. So it will lead your car to move forward in a forward direction. And when it comes to back function, you can see all the four motors will start moving in an anti-clockwise direction. All four motors will start moving in an anti-clockwise direction with their full speed. So like if you would have like in childhood you have used those toy cars, then those toy cars, can you tell means how much motors does those toy cars have? Like I want to see how many of you know. And how does this car turn left or right? Okay, can anyone tell how many motors does the toy cars have inside them? So okay, I'm getting some answer. So now I will tell like how our car will turn left or right. Okay, so like in those toy cars, mainly like two motors are there, and out of those two, one is to control the backside two tires. Like one would be here and will be controlling these two tires, and one would be here who would be controlling the direction of our car. But in this project, I have used these four motors over there. So like it is the main part. Like how will I move our car turn left or right? So in order to like move my car left or right, you just see like these two motors. Just see if I move these two motors in an anti-clockwise direction. Okay, in an anti-clockwise direction, these two motors. If I move in an anti-clockwise direction, and these two motors, if I move in a clockwise direction, so what will happen? Like this part will move this side, and these both will try to move this side, which will ultimately move your car turn left. Okay, so I hope you guys understood like how to turn your car left or right. Okay, so in this code also it is written same over here, and In the last loop, if to what to do, how will our car stops, when the stops loop is executed, then all the motor will stop functioning and will stop at that point. Okay. So now the uploading of the code, if we are uploading our code, then we must make sure like this RX and TX pins, mainly this RX and TX pin, means receiving and transmitting pins of this Arduino should be opened while uploading the code. Like our motor driver should not be overlapped with this Arduino, because if it is done so, your code will not be getting uploaded, and you will find some errors, and it may cause damage to your Arduino as well. Okay. So the last thing, the app, this app is easily available on the Google Play Store, and you can open it from there. And inside that app, you will be finding a settings option over there, and then you can connect to the car, and your Bluetooth module name would appear there. Okay. And not in my case, I have changed my Bluetooth module name to my name. Okay. So, and then when it is finally connected, this green symbol will appear. So that means your car is ready to ride. Okay. So let's see to the full video of working demonstration of my project. Okay. So that's all. If anyone is having any doubt regarding my project, then he can ask his doubt in on chat box. Okay. Any questions? Oh, it seems no. So then on moving next, we Kastu will show his present his working model on Tinkercad. So guys, begin with Kastu. Over to you, Kastu.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm back, and right now we will be showing you how you can start creating your own simple circuits on Tinkercad using Arduino. So Tinkercad is this website. We initially told you to make an account on it. If you want to save your circuits, you can make an account on it, and this actually provides a really simple way for you to test and see if your circuits in real life would actually work. So in this, we will be using obviously the Arduino, a small breadboard, an LED, but as you can see, this LED has four terminals as compared to two. What is this for? This is the red terminal, the blue terminal, the green terminal, and the cathode, which is connected to ground. So these are self-explanatory. This is actually an RGB LED. So you power the red terminal, and the LED glows red. For the blue, it glows blue, and for the green, it glows green. And using the combination of these three, we can achieve almost any color on this LED. Next, we have this PIR sensor, the dome-like looking thing which I showed you at the beginning of the workshop. And this is its representation in 2D, of course. So this is the PIR sensor. And these will be the components that we will be using today. and any other components you can see over here on the right. If you just click on all these different components are ready for you to play with once you start creating your own circuits. So if you guys want, you can follow along and create the circuit with me. So first, let's start with the wiring. So as I said, the LED, the cathode is connected to ground, and Arduino has a ground pin, this GND pin over here, and there are two more ground pins over here, GND and GND, as you can see. So let's start with connecting that first. So you just click on the terminal of cathode, and once you move your mouse around, there's this infinite wire that appears. Pretty convenient, right? So you can just use this wire to connect the LED to the ground pin. And for clearance, a clear visual in your circuits, I would recommend following a strict strict color code. So I am coloring the ground wire black. So if there is a really complicated and messy circuit, once you see a black wire, you immediately know that, okay, this is for ground. This is connecting something to the ground pin. So this is our LED connected to the ground. Then there is the red terminal, which we will be connecting to this terminal of the breadboard for now. And let's color it red, since it is connecting the red pin of the LED. Then we have the blue, and similarly for the green. Next, we will use a resistor, 3 resistors actually. And by default, all these 3 resistors are of 1 kilo ohm each. And we will connect a resistor over here, and over here. I will tell you why in just a second. And these resistors, their resistances can be changed over here. You can type the resistance that you want this to be, and it will change automatically. So why are we doing this? Why are we connecting a resistor in specifically these positions? As you probably know, and even if you don't, it's fine. All these slots over here, like the 9 and the 10, all these slots, they are connected in series. And all these rows over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they are connected in, they are actually connected in parallel. So if you connect if you connect a resistor terminal over here, so that means this terminal is internally connected to this wire as well. So this terminal again of the resistor is internally connected to the red wire as well. And now we have brought the second terminal to this row over here. So now if we connect any wire over here, let's say we make this connection, just a second. Let's say we make this connection, color the wire red again. So that means this red wire is connected through the resistor and to this red wire, which is connected to the Arduino in pin number 3. So similarly, that is why we are using the resistors over here. And similarly, we'll be connecting the blue and the green wires as well. So I'll connect the blue to pin number 4 and the green to pin number 5. Just reposition the Arduino. Okay, and as you can see, all these pins, the digital pins, are actually numbered from 0 to all the way to 13 and then ground. So why is this done is so that when we start actually coding with our Arduino, is that the Arduino knows what pin it is working with. Otherwise, it will just be sending random currents here and there everywhere, just messing up your circuit. So this is why they are numbered, and we actually need to remember what wire we are connecting to what terminal. So since we have connected up the LED now, let's move on to the PIR sensor. So the PIR sensor, you can zoom in on any component and just hover over the terminals, and it will show you what that terminal is for. So this terminal, as you can see, is for the signal. This terminal is for the power, and this terminal is ground. So ground, we all know, is to be connected to the ground. Power is to be connected to the 5-volt pin. I'll just show you now because this sensor obviously needs electricity to work. And the signal pin is actually the main pin through which we will be taking an input. So let's start by connecting the ground. As I said, there are two more ground pins over here. So we will take the long route and connect the ground pin over there. Don't worry if you have more than three appliances and you need to connect them to all of them to ground. You can actually connect multiple wires in the same terminal, but that in real life would be slightly impractical. So I'm sticking to different terminals for now. So again, according to the color code, we should code it black. Then for the power, we need to connect it to the 5-volt pin. So I will just connect it right now. Sorry about that. As you can see, the 5-volt pin is over here just above the ground. So let's connect the PIR sensor to that. And let's just color this yellow one. And the signal pin, as I said, is the main pin through which we will be taking input. So we will connect this pin just like the LEDs to one of these digital pins. Let's connect it to pin number 2. And let's just color this something else. Let's say orange. So we know what color this is. So now that our circuit is in place, let's start with coding. It might seem a bit scary at first, working with this complicated looking circuit, but it's actually really simple. So once you click on the code button, if any of you have used Scratch, this might seem familiar. So there are these block type of things, so which you can use to create like a jigsaw puzzle or something to set your code. But if you're not comfortable with this, just click on the blocks button and switch to text, which we will be doing right now. Switch to text and click on continue, and it will switch to this. Now, for now, we can just delete all this. And I will first paste the code that I have prepared for this circuit and then walk you through it. Oh, sorry. I'll just paste the code for this. Oh, okay, Yash, I will wait for a while. Yes, I will show you the connections properly. If any of you are following, I will wait for you for a while. Uh, you can see the connections over here. For the PIR, the signal I have connected to pin 2. The ground I have connected to ground, and the yellow wire, the power, I have connected to 5 volts. Okay, so I hope that is enough time and you guys are with me if you are making the circuit. And I have pasted this really complex looking code, but it's actually extremely simple once you get to know it. So over here, I have created these integer variables: red, blue, green, and PIR. So I have PIR is obviously for the PIR passive infrared sensor. Green is for the green pin of the LED. Blue is for the blue, and red is for the red. But the numbers are a bit off since we have connected the green pin of the LED to the fifth digital pin number 5 of the Arduino. I will change green from 10 to 5. Then the blue I have connected to 4. So I'll just change 11 to 4. And then red I have connected to 3. So I will change red to 3. And the PIR is connected to 2. So I will just change this to 2. So see, this is where the coloring scheme comes in. If you wouldn't have colored your wires properly, you would have to keep looking at the LED and just follow the path and then check which terminal is connected to which. But right now, you can do that without even looking, just by looking at the color of the wires. So now comes these two functions over here. First one is void setup, and the second one is void loop. So void setup and void loop are the two functions present in every Arduino program ever. Void setup is just to tell the Arduino what circuit it is working with, what circuit it is a part of. It just tells the Arduino, okay, you're working with this circuit. Over here, there is this thing connected. Over there is that appliance connected. Obviously the Arduino needs to know, otherwise again it will just send random currents everywhere. So through the void setup function, we actually tell the Arduino what it is working with. So Anshul earlier talked about these functions called the pin mode. Obviously he told you that all these pins are GPIO pin, general purpose input output. So it can be either input or output. How does the Arduino know? It knows through this function pin mode. It just sets the mode of the pin, whether it is output or input. So when I write a pin mode red output, it means that the red is replaced by 3. So digital pin number 3 is for output. So the Arduino knows, okay, I have to send current out from here. I don't have to accept current from here. Same for the blue and the green. But for the pin mode PIR is connected to pin 2. And from that, we actually need to take input. So when we take input from the PIR, it should be set to input since we are actually accepting current. And then comes this function, serial.begin 9600. So the 9600 is the baud rate, or in very simple terms, just the rate at which data is being transferred. That's all there. That's all there is to the 9600. You don't need to be confused by it. And serial.begin is just initializing this thing, serial monitor. So anything you need to paste, like hello world, hi, how are you doing, anything you need to paste, that appears over here. This is basically the command prompt of the Tinkercad. So anything you need to paste, that appears over here. Next comes this void loop part. That is it for void setup. Next comes this void loop part, and inside this is actually the part that needs to be executed repeatedly. So this is the main part which actually executes the program that we need to do. So initially I have used this variable called int val is equal to digital read of PIR. So what this means is that whatever current value PIR is sending in, it can be one of two states. Either it is sending a current which corresponds to 1, or it is not sending a current which corresponds to 0. So when I say int val is equal to digital read PIR, this val can either store 0 or 1, whether or not, depending on whether or not the PIR is actually sending a current. So after that, I'm just doing serial.println val. So the value of val will be constantly printed on the serial monitor. So we can constantly monitor it and actually find out what is going on in the circuit. Then we add a delay of 1000, which means a delay of 1000 milliseconds. 1000 is just the integer value it takes in, and in milliseconds. So now we check the condition if val equal to high, and val equal to high would mean if the value of val is actually 1. So we need to check if the value of this integer is actually 1. So when will this be 1? When the PIR is actually sending a current. And if you remember, the passive infrared sensor sends a current only when there is motion detected. So in short, we are actually building a motion detector and powering an LED using that. So it seemed really complicated at first, but now you can see how simple it is. So what if val equal to 1, we can just like the digital read, there is the digital write, and I have used red comma high. So what this means is red is obviously replaced by 3 over here. So when I say digital write red comma high, it corresponds to 3 comma high, and that tells the Arduino, okay, for pin number 3 over here, I need to send a current out. So when I say digital write red comma high, it sends a current out through pin number 3 that goes into the LED. And after that, I have kept a delay of 1,000 milliseconds so that it keeps sending a current for 1,000 milliseconds. And after which, okay, sorry about this. After which, there is the digital write red comma low. So as opposed to this is just the alternative of red comma high. This tells the Arduino, okay, stop sending the current now. The LED does not need to glow anymore. So the LED stops glowing. Then I wait again and say blue comma high. So now the terminal 4 will send out a current and the LED should glow blue. And same for the blue, we turn it back off, and then for the green. So this is for the if statement. But what if the value, if the PIR is not sending a current, the value of this integer val would not be 1, it would be 0, and we still don't, and we don't want the LEDs to go off at that point in time. So we just create the else block and uh, execute these three statements: digital write red, blue, and green to low. So we don't want the LEDs to glow anymore. So now, technically speaking, if we run the simulation through this simulation, start simulation, and if there is motion in front of the sensor, this thing should glow. So let's try it out. Start simulation. And once you click on the infrared PIR, there is this thing. And if you move this point over here, you can see our LED glows red, then glows blue, then glows green. If you want, you can do it again. Red, blue, green. So isn't that really simple how we took something as complicated as a motion detector and just used it in a simple way using an Arduino? So now you can experiment with this further, maybe add a buzzer, add something else. You can go always with this. And just to show you why executing your circuits on Tinkercad is actually important before creating them in real time. So I'll just remove these resistors for now and connect these pins directly over here without the resistor. So now there is no resistor in the middle. And if I just start the simulation and just move the PIR sensor, you can see this thing, the icon shown over here. And that is Tinkercad's cute way of telling you that the LED is going to blow up your circuit and ruin everything. So this is why simulation is actually important. Since the resistor is not there, a huge amount of current is flowing through this LED, and it will blow, and it might damage even your sensor or your Arduino. So that is it from my side for now. And if there are any doubts regarding this Tinkercad, you are free to ask them now. I will share the code right now. If you want to run this yourself, I will share this code right now. It is there in the chat box. So are there no doubts regarding this Tinkercad? Okay, if not, that was it from our side today. And we would love it if you would leave a feedback telling us how productive this workshop was. We will post a link to that right now. Yes, thank you, Anshul. If you would just kindly leave your feedback on how interesting or how productive you found this workshop, that would be amazing. So I would like to hand it over to Samanyu Bhaiya, who would for the closing. of the workshop.
Okay, guys, that was an amazing session. I hope all of you liked it and all of your questions were answered. I'll still give maybe 2 or 3 minutes for any of you to ask any other doubts that you might have. So go ahead and yeah, be sure to fill in the form for your um, further feedback and how you like the event and workshop and how we could improve if required in the future. So, yep, that was hard vibe for you. Thank you.
Divyan, actually, while pasting the code, the final, the actually the limit was hit on the number of characters. The else part is not actually copied. I'll just send that again. If you just add this to your code, it should be fine. Just check the brackets and all. I'll just add the last part of the code.
Also, guys, make sure that you fill the attendance form.